during the day, and now there's going to be overnight coverage. And so today, by the way, I will be proactive. There was an ambulance that went, but it was somebody that had a medical condition not related at all to any COVID-19 virus. And we have procedures in place. We've done this before for flu and everything like that. We have procedures in place that maintain isolation and infection control all the way from transferring, from the patient's room to the hospital, ambulance, and so on. And I've worked in ICUs for many years of my life as a pediatrician and working in hospitals since 1979, where we dealt with very deadly infections, and we took care of the patients and washed our hands and wore the masks and went and ate in the cafeteria. Didn't infect anybody, right? So, and we had contact with these patients. So these are people at NAV Center, and the reason I say that is because the NAV Center employees were quite worried, and I spent a lot of time speaking to them. And I'm also getting phone calls from schools saying the kids are being bullied now because their parents work at NAV Center. Some parents are refusing to send their kids to daycare and to schools because their parents go to work at NAV Center. And that I will be addressing tomorrow. Letters will go out to all parents to explain that. There's absolutely no risk to them. There's no way that somebody working in, my God, 1,000 meters away from the quarantine zone, which is blocked off completely, can transfer that virus. There's no way. The virus is contained in the area. They wear masks, they wear procedures. The routine of the passengers, by the way, the passengers are 50 and over, average probably 75. It's an older cohort. So they're going to need some medical, some of them have chronic medical conditions. So yes, we do have on site. We're trying to keep them on site. And if we do, and the thing is, I want to tell people, if an ambulance goes and picks them up, doesn't mean they're going there for a COVID virus. In Trenton, all the ones that went to hospital were actually not related to COVID. They were, fainting spells, heart issues, and so on. So I'm moving forward. We have now, it's been, day 3 now, I think it is, of quarantine, where I've been there almost every day, so is the mayor. I've seen the infection control protocols. And by the way, how is local public health? I want to tell you the chain of command here. This is a federal operation, the Public Health Agency of Canada. And we're collaborating at the local level, to start to work with the mayor and others to have local communications, but very importantly as well, we train and oversee all of the infection control protocols that they have. Our staff went and trained some of the Army people to ensure that they put the masks on properly. We have people on site to ensure that the Red Cross is wearing the masks properly. Because don't forget, it's going in that you got to be protected, and then coming out, you got to be completely clean. So, and that's what we're doing. So the in and outs of that, the routines of the individuals, who, by the way, I feel very bad for because they've been through a big ordeal. Essentially, they're in their rooms. They are not allowed to go to the rest of everything's warded off. They're not allowed to go anywhere else. If they leave their room, they're to wear masks and gloves. They are not to congregate. They can go outside and sort of supervise to make sure they're not close to anybody for periods of time. And then, again, wearing masks and gloves. All of these support services, laundry, linen, cleaning of rooms, disinfection is done by a third party that does it for hospitals and has been doing it for Trenton. Again, no NAV Center worker. Food is prepared on site, but is delivered through a tunnel. And we've got a clean room and a sort of a transfer in the tunnel. And I think the mayor has seen it as well. And it kind of goes into a neutral zone, and it's all in boxes, in cardboard boxes, with disposable utensils. The laundry of the individuals is done by themselves, by the individuals, and stays on site. So you can see that it's all self-contained, and there really is to my mind, no increased risk of the presence neither to visitors at NAV Center or employees or to the surrounding area. And I've said that time and time again. I'm actually, frankly, more worried about flu. We've had 9 or 10 flu outbreaks in our area recently, and we've had 3 in daycares as well. I'm more concerned about that. So washing our hands, sneezing into our sleeves, coughing into the sleeves will protect us from that and the COVID virus. Now, I also want to tell you that we are a bit concerned about the number of countries, because I get the situation updates on a daily basis, and I've actually shared it with a lot of the mayors. I share, we have daily updates on that that are separate from our public updates as well. We've seen now it's close to 80,000 cases, I think, in China, close to 3,000 deaths. But we're seeing some clusters in Italy. We're seeing clusters in Iran. We're seeing clusters in South Korea. So the United Nations and the World Health Organization is keeping a close eye on that. I'm frankly more worried about that than I'm worried about the situation here. I'll be honest with you. For now, however, our risk in Canada, our risk in Eastern Ontario, with or without the passengers at the NAV Centre, remains low. And that's what the message I have. And I can answer any question you'd like.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. Council? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. I just, there's one thing that you haven't mentioned, and that's the mental state of
Yeah.
these
Oh,
folks.
yes. Thank you.
I'd really like to hear how
Yes.
we're handling that.
Thank you, I forgot one thing. There is an on-site emergency medical assistance team. This is the same, it's called EMAT. If you recall, about 5 years ago, we had the Keshe flood evacuees there were about 700 of them for about 8 weeks at a time. And I coordinate the local care for them, but we had overloaded our services because for 7 weeks we couldn't handle it. So I actually called the EMAT team. So essentially it's a MASH unit that comes and sets up a clinic, tents and everything, with all their own equipment. And so it's the same unit that's now on site that provides both medical, but importantly, as you correctly point out, and I omitted, mental health services. 2 ways. Either directly, they have social workers, they have mental health workers. Either directly with individual, we have special rooms that we've set up in the NAV Centre that they can talk and so on. And if let's somebody is lonely and wants to just talk and follow up, we give them iPads and they can actually FaceTime on a encrypted way to somebody in the clinic, so they don't have to leave the room. So yes, that's very important. And the Red Cross has been very good. I mean, we're doing all kinds of things. Like tomorrow, I think, is Pancake Day or something like that. There's all kinds of things that we're trying to do, welcome packages for them to support them. But you're right, there is a very, very concerted effort to address their mental health needs.
And what that comes from is knowing that if I was quarantined on a ship and then quarantined somewhere else and then quarantined again before I go home, after a while living in one room would
Sure.
kind of.
Oh yeah, like I said from the beginning, I feel very bad for them. They've been, some of them were in rooms with no windows, right? So that's even worse. At least here, it is a hotel. It's a private hotel. They have their private amenities, the private bathrooms, and so on. I don't know if a lot of you have been there. It's like a hotel. It is a hotel, and so, but they also can go out at least and get some fresh air, which is unlike what they had on the ship. They can walk around and so on. So I think that there's a bit of a change. I recognize that they're still kind of quarantined in the area, but I think, and I'm comfortable because a lot of people were saying, why are you quarantining them? They were quarantined for 14 days. The reason is, I don't know if you know the numbers, almost 15% of the ship got infected. Of the 4,000 passengers, there were 15% of them. So what happened? Is it because they all were exposed at day one, before they had the quarantine, and developed it? Or did something happen in there? We can't take that chance. And then if I find somebody, let's say, and I know we'll be testing the individuals here. People are worried, what happens if it's positive? Most situations, if it's positive, we'll isolate them in a room, wait till it's negative, and they're fine. It's not going to pose a danger. But imagine if we hadn't quarantined that individual who tests positive and then ends up in Walmart or eating with you at McDonald's or whatever, right? So that, to me, is a prudent approach to doing it. I realize it's it's another 14-day quarantine, but I think it's very important for the public health. We need to confine it. We don't want those clusters that are occurring in Italy. In Italy, they're closed down a whole city now. They've closed down universities, they've closed down schools. In South Korea, it's becoming a big issue as well. And in Iran, it's going to become a big issue. And by the way, tomorrow, the Public Health Agency of Canada is going to be meeting the provincial territorial leaders to look at perhaps expanding travel advisories to these countries as well, and also ensuring that physicians in emergency rooms, let's say somebody comes in, not only if they have symptoms of a cold and fever, to ask about travel history, but not only to China, but now to Italy, those areas as well. So it is becoming an issue.
I want to thank you, last comment, and the mayor for the extra work that you folks have been doing and the information that's getting out to people to straighten out folks that don't understand what's going on. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Councillor McDonald and, McIntosh or McDonald first? Councillor McDonald and then Councillor
Thank you
McIntosh.
very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Dr. Emiliotis, I just want to say I so appreciated seeing you on television when I did see you, because there was great potential for panic and fear. You radiated calm and competency, and somehow you just brought public health, which is usually a rather remote concept from us in our own medical lives. You brought it home and just let us know that the machinery existed,
Yep.
and that you got the training, the knowledge, and wonderful, we have the facility that was able to institute all these public health measures. And I thank you especially for the calmness you radiated.
Appreciate it. And I'll be a bit political if you don't mind. This time, if we had not pushed back on the public health changes, we'd be disbanding the health unit in a month. I want to say that.
Yep. It's okay to say that.
It's okay to say that, because that's why we pushed back, and I hope that they're not going to make any changes. This is a big distraction to us right now.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to do is worry about funding and worry about downloading to municipalities and, amalgamating health units.
Mhm.
Sorry, I was a bit political there, but I had to
That's okay.
throw that out there.
Councillor McIntosh?
I just want to reiterate what my colleague said. The rumors are a nasty thing. When they start, they're hard to put out, like a brush fire. I thought the mayor and yourself handled it nicely. You were really caught off guard Saturday night. I watched the media coverage of both of you, and I commend you both for the sort of a lowering the temperature.
Thank you.
It was nice to see. Also, I understand that we're trying to make these people as comfortable as possible, and welcome to Cornwall. I know the mayor's working behind the scenes at this, arranging for things to just make them feel a little bit better. It must be a terrible ordeal. You go on a trip of your lifetime, you end up in quarantine for weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
One question I had, and I think you answered it.
Sure.
Somebody asked me, what if somebody tested positive? Do they go to the local hospital? But I think you've
Okay.
answered that.
No, as I mentioned before, it is important, I'll repeat it because it's worth repeating, because they always say that. 83% of individuals who develop it just stay home. They'll stay there. We're not going to bring them to the hospital. If they require hospitalization, we have protocols in place. I'm on the phone every day with the chief of staff of the Cornwall Hospital, the Ottawa hospitals, and the ambulances with protocols of how we will transfer them. It's not unlike if we had a patient who had the flu, we want to transfer from one to another. It's the same precautions. I'm not worried about it. Just because it's a novel virus, the containment procedures are the same. We're all used to it, but we had, since day one, day-to-day, daily deliberations and working through the protocols with our EMS here, with our hospitals. And if need be, if a patient requires to go to Ottawa for tertiary care, we have those mechanisms in place as well.
Well, I appreciate, when I first heard, I sort of said, okay, fine. Then people started coming to me and said, oh, we're going to have to shut down the town and the rest of it. But I'm glad you carried this the way you have. It's good to hear.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bergeron?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to clarify, at the beginning, you said no risk. It's a
No increased risk. There's no
increased
increased risk. Yeah. Now you're gonna play on that. I know you are.
I know, I just want to, can you clarify the difference between no risk
Yes.
and low risk?
Okay. There is extremely low risk for COVID virus in Eastern Ontario, and the risk remains the same. So there's no increased risk.
Thank you.
That's people. I know people have quoted me the other way,
Yep.
but I cannot say there's no risk. I can go get the flu tomorrow. I can't say there's no risk. There's a very low risk, but the point is it has not changed. It has not increased because of the presence of these individuals here. That's my point.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Just one question, because I don't do the medical thing. Is it conceivable that a person could be infected and not display any symptoms?
That's a very good question.
And as a follow-up, because I'll let you answer both at
Sure,
the same time, if the person doesn't display symptoms but potentially has been infected, are they potentially also where they could spread
Spread it.
the disease?
If you were to ask me about measles or the flu, I would say definitely. With this virus, we believe, and I say this is the science today, that you need to be symptomatic to shed the virus. Now, if the question arises, if I test you or myself and I'm positive, I'm okay today, will I shed or not? Well, am I just a carrier, or does it take the virus to once you get sick, it means the virus is replicating in you, and if it's there's many more, then you have more to shed. So to what degree, it's sort of microbiologic here, so to what degree you're infectious, we're not sure. Today what we believe, if you're not symptomatic, you're not infectious. That's what we're believing today. If you're like I said, if you're asking me about measles or others, or flu, you can spread it 3 days before you get sick. With this one, the science today tells us that you need to be symptomatic to do it.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Any other questions? So a couple of comments. I want to first thank council. I know that you were also being bombarded by media requests and media, and I felt like we were all very much unified and on the same page in terms of supporting the messages coming from the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, and making sure that our community got the information it needed, and that there was sort of a single message going out from city administration and city council. So I want to thank you all for that. I did do a site visit Thursday night before they arrived. Red Cross took me through the installation, and it went a long way to helping. And I realized that it's okay for me to have that information, but it's most important for the public to have that information. So I continue to press for daily briefings and daily information going out to the public. So that continues to be a matter of pushing for it, because people are busy and they're taking care of a situation, but the public needs a constant flow of information to know that things are okay. Red Cross is amazing. The nurses on staff are fantastic. I went yesterday again, because I'm going to go to NAV Center. I'm going to attend, because I need to continue to lay eyes on there, because when I'm out and about, people are asking me, and they want to know if I've been, what I've observed. So I sat down with Cornwall police officers who are on constant shift. There's two 24/7 there, and they're ready. There were two OPP officers there who were doing the fittings of the personal protective equipment, should that be required. So, folks there are ready and working diligently. It was quite impressive. I know that all the residents got a welcome package. There was a letter signed by me welcoming them to Cornwall. I got up this morning to hear Jennifer Lee, who is one of the residents, and she was on CBC, speaking of her room at NAV and saying that it faces the river, and she said the St. Lawrence River view is absolutely beautiful. So I think that the community, and I'm hearing from the community, Judge Lafrance Cardinal has put forward a whole list of ideas, and people are coming forward with all kinds of ideas. Food is not a good thing, apparently, to bring in, because somebody said they craved pizza, and then people wanted to send pizza, but we have to manage that. So there are other things. There's a library project that's underway that Ms. Meldrum is going to announce shortly, tomorrow. So if residents have ideas, please funnel them through your city councillors, the mayor, city website. Let us know what you're thinking, and we'll try and work with the Red Cross to show folks exactly how welcoming we are. They're relieved to be here. They're very, very relieved to be here, and that's what the person this morning on the radio said. I also contacted Mayor Jim Harrison, who is the mayor of Trenton. I reached out to him on Saturday, and he returned my call right away to say that he didn't get to meet them. They were all leaving by the time then. He said, I never got to meet them, but I do hope that all of these folks come back to my city under better circumstances, and I think we all feel the same way. That we want them to feel comfortable while they're here, and then come back at some point under better circumstances. So I think we're doing what we can moving forward, and we continue to rely on you, Dr. Paul. I do want to come back to one question that is major for people. It involves the hospital.
Yeah.
That is always a concern. So I think people are feeling they have a better understanding of the NAV Centre providing isolation and proper infection control, but the hospital. So can you speak more specifically to the hospital's capacity? Should folks need to go to the hospital for reasons other than related to the virus? How, because we're not hearing directly necessarily from the hospital, we're going through you for that.
But I can reassure you that I was on the phone with Jeanette today. I'm on
Okay.
the phone with her every day. I speak to the Lauren, Chief of Staff, every day. Our infection control nurses work directly with the infection control people at the hospital. I give them daily updates. The healthcare providers have a separate daily update from me. And so the hospital is prepared. They're overwhelmed. It's flu season, so they're very busy, but they do have the capacity they have the personal protective equipment, they have the protocols in place, they have infection control practitioners in place. This is the exact same precautions we take for the flu or other things. So it's not different for them. It's only a capacity issue. But in terms of the protocols, they do have the ventilation that's required. They have all that is in place. We know that. I even know how many they have. And so, they even have portable ones need be. So there are two reasons that people will go to the hospital. And again, whether if it's COVID related, they're going to go there to get respiratory help, because what happens is people get pneumonia, have difficulty breathing. Now, if they require intubation or more intense treatment, we're going to transfer them to Ottawa. We did the same for H1N1. I mean, we've done that before. So the presentation and the complications are the exact same that they are for the flu in this population, and this hospital handles that. Our concern is they're overloaded. Certain situations, and we have bypass situations in place where if it's a stroke, for example, or whatever, they go directly to Ottawa. So all these protocols are in place. I have no doubt. This is a beautiful hospital. It's a very competent hospital, and the people there are competent. Our infection control people, we sit on their infection control committees anyway, so we know them very well. So we always share with them two things. One, in terms of infection control, support them in infection control. And secondly, I got several calls over the weekend from the Cornwall Hospital. This is a patient that arrived, notwithstanding, nothing to do with NAV Center, arrived from, got here from Dubai, and he's got a cold. Should we consider, isolation? No, but now if they call me today and said he comes from Italy, I would say yes. So we work with them, 24/7. We got a call from the Winchester Hospital, 5 in the morning on Saturday, similar situation. So no, I'm not concerned with the hospital. All hospitals are overwhelmed this time of year, but it doesn't mean they don't have the capacity to do it. And we are working with mechanisms to, again, ensure that, first of all, we are not going to send a client, a patient from the NAV Center without calling them in advance and making sure that they have a room ready and the protocols are in place. Those things are all done. Your EMS is working, hand in hand with us to be able to ensure that communication is in place. So it's before going to the hospital, and it's the transfer to the hospital, and then it's the reception at the hospital. Those are all the three, and the treatment, obviously. Now, if the patient is very sick, we'll stabilize the patient here and send them to Ottawa, like we do for individuals that need more intense care, tertiary care.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for mentioning our EMS. They are ready.
We're
Our first
working hand in hand
responders
with them.
are, they're
No
all ready
question.
and prepared. Okay, great. Did you get some rest yourself, sir?
I stayed home, but I was on the phone all the time. So, but it's okay. It's okay. I just wanted to ensure that everything was okay. That things went smoothly over the weekend. I was there all day today as well. So I think the temperature there is calmer too.
Good.
I think the staff are more aware. I'll be honest with you, I was more concerned about what I heard about schools and daycares.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to be able to again say, there's no way that the individuals working at the, NAV Center are putting you at risk. There's no risk there. Let's put it this way.
Thank you, Dr. Paul.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming and presenting to us, and we're going to continue to support the flow of information.
Yes,
That's the most important thing now.
I think we, just another thing, we're working with the federal, city, PHAC, all the different communications people are working together. Today, we released another situation update, so we're going to be releasing either a written situation update or me on video, answering questions and so on.
Perfect.
And we'll share it, and we had one today. And just so you'll know, I send a daily update to all mayors in our area and all CAOs and all community partners. So if you wish to receive that, your CAOs get it and your mayors get it. Okay?
Thank you.
you.
Stay rested and well, okay?
I will.
Yeah.
I might stay home tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Emiliotis. We appreciated that.
Thank you.
I want to also, yes, you can clap, you can clap. I also want to thank Emma Meldrum for helping throughout this, being quite frankly a superstar in terms of helping to coordinate communications. You can imagine that was a quite a heavy task on the Sunday and the Monday in particular, so thank you, Ms. Meldrum. I also want to thank publicly Katie Verhoeven as well, who was helping me with my personal communications through my Facebook and social media channels, and I appreciate the work that she did as well. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Next, we have the Cornwall and Area Arts Hall of Fame for 2019 inductees.
So how do we proceed? Because there's quite a nice crowd here tonight for this.
So if I may, Madam Mayor, I will call up the inductees one by one to sign the book. If the inductee is not present but has a representative, I would ask that person to come up, introduce themselves, and tell us what the relationship is to the inductee.
Okay. Is that, everybody okay with that? Yes?
First up is Rick Forrester, founder of the Glen Productions and builder of Glen Theatre.
My name is Dorothy Forrester, I'm his wife, and I'm accepting a close to you, Mr. Forrester.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm just going to read something about Rick Forrester as you do that. He was a modern-day Renaissance man. He was the driving force in the creation of Glen Productions, a theatre company that brought live theatre and Broadway musicals to Cornwall. Within the Glen, Rick did it all. He acted, he sang, he directed, built sets, and designed the theatre. Rick led a 30-year run of musical theatre in Cornwall. So welcome.
Thank you. Now, do I sign this book?
Yes, please.
Oh, there's a pen there.
There's a
I can
golden
see it.
pen.
There's a golden pen, yes.
And do I sign my name or his name?
Madam Clerk, how does that work?
How's that work?
I would suggest that you sign your name on behalf of your late
All
husband.
right. Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, I just looked add that Dorothy is a star in her own right. She is the director of Encore Seniors at the moment, and she was always a great ally to Rick in Glen Productions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Forrester.
Thank you.
Encore
Next.
Seniors is wonderful, by the way. Every member looks far younger than their actual age. It's stunning. Don't know how you do that. Madam Clerk.
Next is Brad Bonaparte, Mohawk culture activist and artist.
Is there anybody here for Mr. Brad Bonaparte?
Next, we have Louise André Badil, musician.
Hi, my name is Irene Laird, and Louise is my sister-in-law. And she's in Victoria, BC right now, working hard. But she knows about this lovely evening, and I'll speak with her when I get home tonight and tell her all about it.
Good. Welcome, Ms. Laren.
Thank you.
So Louise André Baril is a star in the international music world, one of Canada's most accomplished musicians. Louise André went from child prodigy to piano virtuoso. She has produced 40 albums, and in 2016 she produced and performed in Triard, a celebration of classical music in St. Raffles Ruins that has morphed into an annual festival. Thank you for signing on her behalf.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Madam
We have
Mayor.
Michel Chauvin-Bourdon, musician.
Bienvenue. So Michelle Bourdon brought the gift of music and song everywhere she worked in Ontario and Quebec. In Cornwall, Michelle founded Chœur en Fête, which brings the Francophone community together through music. Michelle is also a writer and actor in L'Amalgame and a promoter of the Nativity concerts featuring the magnificent Cassavant organ. Félicitations et merci beaucoup, Michelle. Madame Chauvin-Bourdon also directs the Christmas choir. 2 Christmases in a row we've had beautiful choir singing, and Michelle does that work as well. Merci.
Next is Noella Cottenham, artist.
Anybody here for Noella?
We also have Janet Irwin from the theatre.
Hello, Ms. Burke.
Yes. My name is Katie Burke. I have known Janet for a very long time, and she is an inspiration not only in theatre here in Cornwall, but also in Ottawa.
Janet Irwin is one of the luminaries of Ottawa theatre, a director, playwright, librettist, producer, dramaturge, consultant, teacher. Janet directs for the National Arts Centre, the Great Canadian Theatre Company, GCTC, and the Upper Canada Playhouse, among others. In 2015, she received Ottawa's Victor Tolgelsi Arts Award and was given life membership in Canadian Actors Equity. Thank you, Ms. Burke.
Next is Nicole Labelle, founder of L'Amalgame.
Bienvenue. Nicole Labelle is a cultural force in Cornwall's Francophone community, and her achievements there enrich the entire city and all of Eastern Ontario. Nicole co-founded L'Amalgame in 2004, and that group encompasses theatre, Millefeuille, the Readers Component, and Les Écrits Libristes, the Writers Club. Nicole is a strong believer in the transformative power of art. Bienvenue et merci. Her son is also Nicolas Doyon, who's a fabulous musician as well. So she's not only an artist, but she produces artists. So we're very grateful. Merci, Nicole.
Roger Levac, writer, scholar, and painter.
Bienvenue, Monsieur Levac. Roger Levac is a multidimensional artist, writer, painter, and teacher. He is the author of 4 novels, one of which, Petite Crapaude, won the Prix Trillium and the Prix Le Droit in 1998. Roger participated in many exhibitions, including a one-man show at Crag in 2015. His archives have been accepted by the Centre for Research in French-Canadian Civilization at Ottawa University. Bienvenue, Roger. Félicitations et merci.
Veronica Maguire.
Anyone here for Veronica Maguire?
Doug Hill, I taught Veronica and produced some theater for her. I hope my handwriting actually is legible. I've got a bit of a shake here.
It's good to see you, Mr. Hill. Welcome. Veronica Maguire launched a stellar career in dance from the after-school programs at GV. Currently based in Victoria, Veronica established the first school of flamenco dance there 25 years ago. Her most recent production is the superb Pasajes. In 2014, Veronica was presented with the prestigious Jacqueline Lemieux Prize by the Canada Council for her lifetime contribution to dance. Thank you, Doug.
Duncan McIntosh, artistic director.
That's me too. I taught Duncan as well. He was, well, like Veronica, he was a member of the repertory theater company I did at General Vanier back in the beginning of that poor school.
Duncan Charlie McIntosh is St. Andrew West's gift to the theatrical world. He has been producer, director, and artistic director for many theatres, including the Prince Edward Island Conservatory and Watermark Theatre, the Shaw Festival, the Canadian Film Centre, the Canadian Opera Company, and most recently, artistic director of the rededication ceremonies at Vimy, France, in 2017. Thank you again, Doug Hill.
He's also my wife's cousin.
Fair enough. Those connections are important. Merci.
James Fagan Tate.
Ms. Burke.
Yes. I had the pleasure of teaching Jimmy Tate, and he has been a force in theater in British Columbia, in the Vancouver and northern British Columbia area. Very talented.
So James Jimmy Fagan Tate is one of the most hardworking and celebrated actors, writers, directors in Canada. Based in Vancouver, but ranges the world over from Canadian theatres and festival sites to Edinburgh, London, and Paris. He is a 2-time winner of the prestigious Jesse Richardson Award and numerous other accolades. Thank you, Katie.
L'Association Focused Art Association is the first organization to be inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Bonjour,
Bonjour,
Madame Desnoyers.
c'est ça, Rose.
Rose.
Président, président, I'm the president, and I have this honor because our hundreds of people who have been part of Focus Art since 2004. So that's going over 20 years. No, 15, 16, my math is bad, eh? 16 years that we have existed, non-for-profit, helping artists, visual artists especially. Thank you.
Thank you. Focus Art Association has been nurturing hub for local visual artists. Membership is inclusive, eclectic, open to musicians, painters, photographers, patrons. Regularly scheduled monthly meetings facilitate networking and artist education through workshops, demonstrations, and artist retreats. Focus Art stages a juried show and a members show every year and exhibits to the public in mall space, public library, and on the walls of City Hall and local businesses. Focus Art is managed by a dedicated executive board that is duly elected by the membership. Meetings and workshops are open to the general public. Merci, Rose.
Thank you very much.
Please tell all of your members that we're very grateful.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes this presentation,
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
If I may, Madam Mayor, just a couple of
Councillor
words.
Gardner, go ahead.
Many of the people that were to sign the book today were at the induction ceremonies, and they came from the East Coast from British Columbia, and they were here in Cornwall for the ceremonies that we had. So not only were they from Cornwall, but they came from all across Canada to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. The celebration was in October 2019, and it was a beautiful gala, and we hope to have more of those because it really makes everybody feel good in Cornwall. We feel proud. Councillor McDonald.
I guess I would like to add on that note, Madam Mayor, that the nomination period for nominating people to the 2020 induction ceremony is open now. It's open year-round. So on the Cornwall Arts Hall of Fame website, there is a nomination form. And of course, we'll be at the Home and Trade Show, I'm sure, handing out nomination forms. We encourage you to look around you and find the artists in the community that you'd like to see honored.
Merci et félicitations à tous. Congratulations. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Our next presentation is the week of mourning for city employees who have passed away in 2019.
So there's been a change in how we recognize employees. If you want to talk about that change, we used to, every time somebody passed away, would lower the flag. So what are we doing now, Madam Clerk?
We did lower flag previously under corporate policy, but we received a lot of questions, and a lot of people out there weren't aware of why the flags were being lowered. So we thought we would bring a little bit more attention to our employees who have passed away by doing a week of mourning. So the city flag has been lowered at all our buildings for the week, for this week. And Madam Mayor is going to introduce, tell us a little bit about those employees who have passed away.
So you'll see on your screen, we have Paul Normand Dion. And Mr. Dion was an employee of the City of Cornwall at Cornwall Transit since May 27, 2013. He is husband of 38 years to Linda Dion, father of Stéphane and Carl, son of Catherine and the late Alexandre Dion, grandfather to 5 grandchildren, Alexandre, Zandra, Dalen, Sébastien, and Angèle. The next one is Raymond Ulrich Campeau. So Mr. Campeau started his employment with the City of Cornwall on May 4, 1964, and retired as Deputy Fire Chief on December 4th, 1994. Husband of Madeleine Campeau, father of Michel and Hélène, Lynn, and Louise. grandfather of Chantal, Nathalie, Dylan, Caitlin, Martine, Eric, Sophie, Gabrielle, and Brandon, and great-grandfather of Noah. Son of the late Ulrich Campo and the late Alice Charette. Jean-Paul J.P. Brisson. Sergeant Brisson was hired by the Cornwall Community Police on July 18, 1958, and retired on April 30th, 1991. Husband of 62 years to Laurette Brisson, father of Joanne, Marc, Sylvie, Michel, and Luc. Grandfather of 10 grandchildren and great-grandfather of 7 great-grandchildren. And Narcisse Nelson Archambault. Mr. Archambault began his employment with the City of Cornwall on October 4, 1976 at Cornwall Transit and retired on August 31st, 2017. Husband of Laurie, father of Valerie and Chantal, grandfather of Amy, Jordan, Katie, Kirsty, James, great-grandfather of Brody. I just want to say we had employee recognition last week. We do that annually. Councillors Gardner and McDonald were present. It's always a very moving occasion to be able to thank City of Cornwall employees. From the time that you get up in the morning and turn on a tap to the end of your day, you will have experienced the work of a city employee numerous, countless times during the day. From water to driving down a street to walking to catch a bus, visiting friends or family at Glenstordon Lodge, taking your grandchildren to the Benson Centre, going to watch the Ontario Curling Championships at the Civic Complex. You look outside your window and what you see is generally the work of a city employee in some way or another. So we're always grateful to them for their work for the city, and we also mourn their passing when they leave us and leave their legacy of work for the City of Cornwall. So we're very grateful, and this is a way of honoring them in a more special and particular way rather than just lowering the flag and not having people understand who they were. So if we could have just a quick moment of silence for the passing of these 4 individuals who worked for the City of Cornwall. You can stand, yeah. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Consent and correspondence. First one is a petition for crosswalk on 2nd Street West, and the action recommended is that council refer this petition to administration for report. And our second one is the drinking water quality report for 2019, with a recommendation that council receive this report.
So those are consent items, eh?
That's
Is that
correct.
it?
We're looking for one motion, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Bennett and Councillor Gardner. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Under unfinished business reports, we have one item, attracting remote workers. The action recommended is that council receive this report.
Moved by Councillor Bergeron. No. Okay. Moved by Councillor Towndale, seconded by Councillor Hollingsworth. Any discussion? Councillor Towndale and then Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I initially requested this report, I believe it was last month. I have to say, this is a nice summary of activities we undertake to attract residents, but unfortunately, this is not what I asked for. My motion asked for a strategy to attract remote workers, and while this report touches on it at a high level, it doesn't really provide that. So I'm sorry to say I am a little disappointed, even though this is a very nice summary and a very complete summary and well-written in terms of what we do to attract residents. It's not what I was looking for. And I would also like to comment a little further on the report itself. The attraction of remote workers is actually identified in our strategic plan as a subpoint under one of our headings. Usually whenever we receive a report that directly references our strategic plan, this is highlighted immediately under strategic priorities on the report. It is not done so in this case. There's a, the report talks about a lack of stakeholder groups focused on remote working. Interestingly enough, when I tabled this motion, I actually received numerous people reaching out to me from across the province. And some of them actually do represent stakeholder groups that actually focus on this. There are actually organizations that receive government funding to work to relocate workers and the labor force outside of major cities like Toronto to smaller areas like ours. And I had some conversations with them. I also had conversations with a number of other people. I'd say one of the most significant was a gentleman by the name of Paul Valet. He's the founder of a company called Pythian, and currently the CEO of another company that he founded called Tahama. And his words were, "We've been looking for an ally like you." Now I'm going to say you as the city of Cornwall as a whole, because it's not just me here. And his sector is technology, and they've been trying to push for things like this for a while. And it was a very insightful conversation, because he says he's been in discussions with the province, and they are actually looking at a remote worker strategy to achieve, like something to achieve this. He said he had a conversation with Minister Fedeli, and this is the kind of thing they're looking at. So I think we need to take advantage of these sort of discussions, connections, and we need to start talking to the provincial government. We have a local representative. Our MPP is a member of the government, so this can be used to our advantage. So I'm going to allow for, sorry, I didn't say I'm going to allow, but I'm going to wait until the end of the discussion. I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, you're the chair. But I'm going to put forward a motion at the end of the discussion on this to establish a task force to explore this and to make it happen. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Councilor Bergeron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Certainly, I second the idea of a task force as one of the items here on my list. I think the difference between Councillor Towndell and I is that I agree with him on everything that he said. I support everything that he said, except that to me says I would not accept this report. And I mean that in the sense that this report doesn't do what was asked. And this was to get a strategic plan for remote work, and I don't see that. I've read it a few times, read it probably 10 times. I just don't understand what's happening here, except for what we are currently doing and adding remote work. So perhaps I can be enlightened a little bit. Perhaps Mr. Peters can speak to maybe what the document doesn't say.
Mr. Peters.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. The report is correctly identified as a thorough description of what we're doing to attract new residents. And I do acknowledge the fact that the motion specifically talked about the remote worker strategy. Couched in my report, especially in the final several paragraphs, are talk about how we would incorporate attracting, specifically targeting remote workers as part of our overall campaign. Our overall campaign, though, right now is currently is inclusive of all young professionals and young skilled workers. Those are the people that we're targeting. We're not specifically, we don't have a specific strategy for logistic workers versus food processing workers. We're going out where young people are looking for new career options. We're speaking to those people in those areas. We're also undertaking print advertising, digital advertising to do that. So we envision an increased presence of remote workers within our marketing material. We've added content on the Chief Cornwall website specific to that sector, where we'll be doing more in coming months with other vehicles and publications that we have influence on, that we are able to use. But at the current time, the budget and the current makeup of the department doesn't allow for a specific funded strategy or funded marketing campaign approaching remote workers.
So thank you. I think that's what I was looking for in this document, is that you provide us with a budget and a strategy that we can vote on specifically aimed at remote workers. So I will not vote to support this. I fully support the idea of a task force. I think there's a lot of work to do. I think during strategic planning, I was very clear that this should be one of our top priorities in terms of the city. I understand how it falls under our, strategic planning, and we are working on some things, but we're not looking for a way to attract logistics and food workers. That's already taken care of. That's part of our plan already. We're looking for very specifically a budget and a plan on attracting remote workers. There's other cities out there that are doing a lot of work. This is a competition, and this document doesn't tell me we're competing. I won't support it. I support the motion coming. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Just one question, well, perhaps two. I'm not sure who I want to couch this to, whether it be to my colleague across the table or to Mr. Peters. So I'll pitch it to Mr. Peters and we'll see where it goes.
I think that's the best plan.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly, and I can't say that I'm an expert on remote workers, quite frankly, I have no idea what I'm talking about, so that's what I'm going to ask. What exactly is the difference between trying to attract remote workers and trying to attract workers in general? Because we do have a shortage of of workers now. Is that fair, Mr. Peters?
Mr. Peters?
Yes, through you, Your Worship. At the current time, we currently have over 250 jobs posted on the Choose Cornwall website. Those represent approximately 400 current jobs that are unfilled in the city of Cornwall, and our major employers tell us that number is actually 600 if you consider the period of time up to, but not including summer student employment. So in the next several weeks, a need to fill 600 positions in the city of Cornwall. To answer your question, what is the difference of marketing to somebody who may be looking for a career in with one of our larger employers, or somebody who is looking for a career in remote working? The answer, in my opinion, is not an awful lot. We have positions on the Choose Cornwall website right now where people have the opportunity to work remotely. And when you're talking about young professionals in another community, such as Ottawa and Montreal, perhaps is the two closest, or even Toronto, we have a strategy in place through our work with career fairs where we're speaking directly with job seekers and young professionals. To the best of my knowledge and to the best of my research, there is no dedicated forum, magazine, trade show for us to speak directly to remote workers. There are other strategies once we have co-working space available in the city, to promoting that co-working space through other channels where people are looking for that type of real estate option.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Peters. Then that being said, I have no problem supporting a task force if that's what the will of council is. Sure, why not? But the truth of the matter is, we currently have a number of jobs available that we can't fill as it is. So I'd have to see what the real number is, but I'm not necessarily committed to piling a chunk of money to one specific group when we can't even fill the jobs that are currently available. I think perhaps a longer, grander vision is necessary, and whatever the task force comes up with, I'm more than happy to peruse and debate and discuss. I'd be curious to see how much extra we're going to have to add to this. Certainly that's probably a next budget deliberation. But I guess my point is, Your Worship, if we can't find people to fill the jobs that are available, I'm not really sure how this layers itself. So we'll listen to the debate and get everybody excited. It's part of what we do.
Councillor McIntosh? Thank you.
Oops, there goes a computer.
Yeah.
The, ironically, Maclean's magazine did a story, they call it the gig economy, which is an expanded version of the remote, or as they call them, digital nomads. Interesting that Councillor Towndale talked about somebody calling him breath pressure. Has anybody ever contacted you, Mr. Peters?
Mr. Peters?
Through you, Your Worship, not specifically. We're aware of remote workers and an apparent increase in remote workers in Cornwall. We've profiled a couple on Choose Cornwall. As part of the work to prepare this report, I reached out to our St. Lawrence College, the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development, the Ministry of Economic Development, and the response back was not significant in terms of ongoing activities on their framework of this being a significant issue. Immigration was definitely number one in terms of attracting young residents, new residents to a community and moving them perhaps off of the Toronto framework. That is not to say, however, that we don't think that Cornwall is an attractive place for remote workers, nor do we, in fact, we believe that Cornwall has a lot to offer for remote workers. We also recognize that it's a growing trend. The federal government and other agencies do allow workers alternative workplace arrangements, and so we see there's a good fit. The question ultimately becomes is how much resources do we put into it, and is there an opportunity to develop a specific marketing campaign?
Like Councillor Hollingsworth, I don't know a lot about this, except I just discovered I'm a remote worker too. I haven't been in a newspaper office in 5 years, but I send stuff in all the time. And that's a trend in the newspaper business too. Reporters don't go to the office anymore. They do it all from their homes. The Maclean's article had the pros and cons. One of the cons was remote workers are usually part-time workers who don't get benefits.
Through
Mr.
your
Peters,
worship,
yeah.
that can be the case. That can also not be the case. So there's a significant number of full-time employees. The challenge for a full-time employee is they may be required to come into work at least 1 or 2 days a week, or maybe more frequently, maybe less frequently. So there is a challenge in managing a remote workforce if they are not within the same city or not nearby for meetings. But certainly the technology is there for people full-time to work from their homes and provide what many studies have seen, the same level of efficiency of working from home.
I haven't nephew worked for the federal government. He always goes into the office 1 day a week for Revenue Canada. Does everything from home.
Yep.
And he's a remote worker employed with it. But I was just quoting Maclean's was saying about the benefits thing. Not I'm just quoting what their stats came up with. Many times these people are part-time workers and they get their schedule every week. Here's what we want from you. But I'm quite happy with your report. If they want to create a task force, go ahead and do it and see what we come up with.
Councillor Babb?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this is a lot of information in this report. Thank you, Mr. Peters. I think a task force is also a great idea to see if we can come up with some strategies to take this, to take us further. I did raise the concern when this motion was moved a couple of meetings ago that the turnaround time was going to be quite quick to come up with a strategy. Usually strategies require public engagement and usually a consultant to come up with something, right? And so I was concerned that it's going to be a quick turnaround time. And so I think for the time that was provided, this is a lot of information, which is really great. So I think a task force is a smart next step. However, I want to bring attention to our strategic plan. Our second pillar is attracting, enhancing workforce that meets demands of local employers, reading from it here. And the number one item of that pillar is to convene a workforce group. I'm assuming that meant convening a workforce working group. Has there been any development on this group? I know this is going to be a crisis, or we are in a crisis, I think. And I think we should be, if we're going to be working on creating a workforce or remote worker workforce group, we should probably be looking at our local workforce crisis as well.
Mr. Boileau?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's a good point you're making to concentrate on what the strategic plan says, and perhaps, and I'm not sure how council would like to deal with this, but I think, as Mr. Peters has pointed out, we probably have as much a problem with, this report could have been titled Attracting Workers.
Right.
And it would be a lengthy report as well, because it's equally an issue. And so my suggestion is that if we're going to get a task force together, perhaps with some of the agencies in the community to help the Economic Development Department, that it could be about workforce, period, as opposed to remote workers only. But that is really for council to decide. The point I want to make is that there was a time in the last term that we had a lot of committees, and it was,
Right.
and in order to try to reduce the number of committees that councillors would sit on and that staff would sit on, we were trying to reduce the number of committees, and so I'm suggesting that if the strategic plan talks about workforce and the efforts that have to go into that, perhaps a task force could look at employers as well as, remote workers as well as attracting workers, period.
From the reactions across the table, I don't think it's gonna fly, unfortunately. But I think, they both have their own merit. I think the current workforce situation is a bit of a crisis, and we have some really fantastic employers which at one point are going to pack up and leave if we don't start addressing those needs. And so we need to tackle that, and I don't know if that needs to come as a separate motion, and that probably would have to come at a separate council meeting, but it's in a plan, but has to come back, right? So maybe I can come back with that, because we need to be tackling this like last year, right? So I'll sit on this and come back with a motion in a future meeting.
Councillor Gardner?
Just like to have somebody explain to me, I understand that we need 400 or 600 workers. First of all, I'd like to ask you, Madam Mayor, for your indulgence, if those people in the hall here wanted to leave, would you, you're welcome to leave if you're ready.
This is fascinating, stay.
Now, the difference between 400 workers at Allamel or Walmart as opposed to remote workers who will be working electronically, it's not the same job. So if we are looking to bring in remote workers, let's separate that from everything else. They're not craftsmen, they're not woodworkers, they're electronic, I'll call them geeks for nothing else, because my son is one of them, so, yeah. So explain to me why we wouldn't try to try to bring people in who want to work remotely as opposed to a carpenter. I mean, if we're short carpenters, fine, we're looking for carpenters. If there are jobs like Amazon brought forward 3,000 jobs and they were full benefits, I brought this forward 4 or 5 months ago. It's a different job from a carpenter or from Allamel who makes bacon. So we have to look at it in a different way than just say, well, we're missing 600 workers, so let that be an impediment to remote workers. No, it shouldn't be. They're totally different jobs. So.
Anybody else on the first round? I'll allow a second round. Councillor Bergeron?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to comment that we are talking right now about whether or not this strategic plan helps us attract remote workers. We are not debating whether or not remote workers are necessary. That was part of our strategic plan. That is part of our strategic plan. What I'm saying is we can do a lot more. This document says the workers that we need in this city are important, and I don't disagree with that whatsoever. There are a lot of jobs to fill in this city, but remote work is very different. It is not part-time work. It is people who have jobs who are going to come to Cornwall. We have all of that magic formula that is necessary. Low cost of living, high quality of life. We're right near Montreal and Ottawa. All those things that used to be really important in getting logistics here is exactly the formula to get remote workers here. I do not see that in this document. So I'm voting against it because a task force to me says, let's come up with a better plan. If we approve this, this is the plan. So I think a task force is necessary for all of us to sit down and say, how can we get people to move here? Separate from the other people. I agree. We need to fill those other jobs. But that's what economic development is already doing. That's clear in this document. They are doing what they can to attract those jobs. I support that. But I want a document that comes back with a budget so that we as a council can stand up and say, we're going to put some money into attracting some remote workers. This is not in this document. So we're not talking about whether remote work is a good thing or not, or what. We're talking about whether this is the strategy we want to follow. And as far as I'm concerned, it is not.
Councillor Towndale?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Bergeron touched on a couple of points I wanted to raise. Listen, if more time was required for this report, I would have happily accepted that as a reason for it to be pushed back. It was not requested. You know, it went through approvals. 3 senior managers signed off on this report before it came to council. In terms of getting phone calls, I think to Councillor McIntosh's point is because I was actually interviewed by CBC Radio about this, and that tends to reach more people than cold calling communities to see if there's anything that can be done. So I think that helped. We were talking about remote work, and Councillor Bergeron touched on this. This isn't about creating positions. We're trying to attract people who already work for these companies that already have these jobs, right? The point in our strategic plan is number 2 under trying to grow the population to 50,000 and beyond. And the reason for that is because we'd be attracting individuals who are already employed in these positions. So it's kind of a gimme in that sense. And as he said, we're perfectly situated and located with the right amenities to do so. And when we talk about the jobs that need filling in this community, that is important as well. But these companies need to undertake, and they do undertake, the initiative to fill these positions. And truthfully, in my opinion, that's more their priority because it's their companies. They need to fill these positions. They have HR departments. They have recruiters, or they hire recruiting firms. They dedicate funds for this. They hold their own individual job fairs or participate in other job fairs. In this case, for remote working, we'd be using it to attract residents to the city. It's not about finding jobs for them, creating jobs, or filling jobs. It's about attracting people here. And it's a diversification of our economy in a sense because, you know, with Cornwall's industrial history, whenever the mills started to close, a lot of them were similar in the sense it was a type of manufacturing. And now we see we're very heavy on the distribution side, which is a good thing. But we need to ensure that we have different sectors working in our community to make sure that if there's any sort of downturn in a certain sector, other sectors are still viable. So that being said, and with the discussion where we are now, I'd like to put forward a motion that we strike a task force to develop a remote working strategy, Madam Mayor, if I can get a seconder.
So right now, we have a motion on the floor to receive the report. Procedurally, receiving the report doesn't mean that we necessarily approve of this plan, or it doesn't mean that another motion to create a task force will be contrary to this plan. Correct, Madam Mayor? Madam Clerk?
Through you, Madam Mayor, absolutely correct, but this motion would have to be voted on.
Yep.
First, and then whatever secondary motion is in order.
Okay. So I will speak before I call the vote. So all very good arguments to support some kind of task force. What strikes me when I read this report, and I guess I did have a question for Mr. Peters. You say in your report at page 119 that you are already doing things on the Choose Cornwall website to specifically target remote workers, and that you're redesigning the resident guide to include a section. So what kind of information does that mean? What kind of information are you doing, including specifically?
So, through your question, Your
Yep.
Worship. So specifically, we've created a section on the website for remote worker with content specifically aimed at them, talking about many of the elements that would be attractive to them that Council has mentioned, that was brought up in the strategic planning session, and of course, it's also included in this report. So there's a new section on the website, new page on the website.
Like to deal with affordability
that deals with remote workers, specific languages to them.
Okay.
The website as a whole, though, is already set up to answer those questions, already set up to provide information on housing and on schooling and quality of life, recreation amenities. The remote worker that's moving to Cornwall is moving to Cornwall not because they have a job, they already have a job. They are looking for an alternative place to live and then work remotely for the company that they currently.
So are you adding anything new to speak to them then?
We have.
You have?
We have
Okay.
added a section on remote workers.
Okay.
We are adding content aimed specifically at those people in our new resident guide. We're developing a newcomers guide that's aimed at new Canadians. We are also increasing and revising the content that's available through our career guide which is a new publication that continues to grow. We've greatly expanded the number of job fairs that we have. And in addition to that, we have, as the report mentions, we have plans to highlight young professionals living in Cornwall through the vehicles such as Cornwall Living, through our new partnership with the Ottawa Business Journal and a number of other publications. So there are plans in place to encompass and to highlight remote working as an alternative, as an option for people looking to relocate to Cornwall. And we're going to continue to do that throughout the year.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Towndale's point about attracting people. So the piece about remote workers is of course of great interest, but it's in a broader sense, we do want to attract more people. And these remote workers come with their own people. They come with spouses. They come with kids who will grow up to be Cornwall kids and who may help to fill some of those jobs that we have. So it's about attracting families here, and anything that we can do to support that is a good thing. All in favor of receiving the report? Against? Carried. Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At this time, I would like to put forward a motion to strike a task force to come up with a remote worker attraction strategy.
Seconded by Councillor Bergeron. Any discussion? Councillor Bergeron.
Yes. Can maybe someone describe how a task force would work to me in broad details? It's not, it's an ad hoc committee essentially we're talking about?
Mr. Boileau.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would suggest that the committee that was recently created that looked at municipal grants, that included both councillors as well as administration. However, perhaps in this case would also include people from other agencies who may be relevant and helpful, could either be on the committee or on the task force, or could be resource persons to that task force. And so I see three different organizations: administration, council, and resource people, who may or may not be. I mean, a task force doesn't necessarily have a voting responsibility, and so it doesn't really matter that they're resource persons or full members.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth and then Councillor McIntosh.
Perhaps to Mr. Boileau, and to whoever else wants to wade in on this one. In terms of a task force, historically, task force, whether the mayor's task force or I guess this would be a council task force, they ultimately would make a set of recommendations, correct?
I would think so.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, Your Worship, I would think, and I think having lay people or various community groups wade into this is kind of critical. But I would think that pretty much anybody who is a member, with the exception of maybe a resource person who's taking minutes and going out and finding out information, should have some kind of a vote or something like that. Because and I'm not like an expert on the whole task force thing, but to me it would seem that if we're going to do the broad-based community thing, council, admin, people at large, that ultimately if the task force is going to make recommendations, everybody who's sitting around the table should have kind of a vote. But now that being said, either to yourself, Your Worship, or to admin, like, do we have, like, or perhaps to the mover seconder, is there like what kind of time frame are we looking at here?
So I'm gonna.
Do you have a number in your head, or?
I'm gonna look to Mr. Boileau.
Well, certainly a task force is not intended to be the term of council like a committee of council would be. And so I would think that they have a very specific mandate, which should be a shorter term and which would come back with a report to council as you've suggested, with recommended action items. So again, perhaps the first step that could be taken is that a couple of councillors are involved together with administration to talk about how that, who should make up that task force, which agencies in the, and perhaps then come back to council with that framework.
In some terms of reference and.
Right.
Right. That being said, Your Worship, certainly I would prefer to see us sooner than later. I mean, if this is something that is important to council as a whole, and if it's going to improve our community, then I don't want it to drag on for months or
Right.
years potentially. So we'll talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McIntosh.
Yeah, I was concerned about the terms of reference, who sits on this. Tonight, if we do pass a motion to have a task force, that's the first step. The second step, who serves on it? When we go outside, how many people serve on it? When we go outside, what kind of people do we want in it, from the private sector or the public sector? Also, most task forces are given a time frame saying, we want the report on November 20th. Come back with a report. Tell us what you found and what we can do. So those are the elements that should be part of the task force. Tonight we maybe approve it, and then we come back and we do the terms of reference and whatnot.
I'm thinking that administration's taking notes on this.
And really that's the idea is that I think a report has to come back to council, giving a schedule as well as who we think needs to sit on this. I believe that you don't want a task force that is made up of a very large group. I think, as with the municipal grants, I think it was a small enough group that you were able to, and so I foresee that, but also allowing resource people to participate as well.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think as I listen to the discussion, that a really important point in the terms of reference would be to come up with a definition of remote worker. So that we avoid thinking, I mean, there was some objection when Councillor McIntosh mentioned particularly part-time, but is a remote worker somebody who's essentially a contract worker? Like, I think there's great potential for exploitation of workers when they are working in a situation where their benefits aren't necessarily assured, and when they're considered like independent contractors rather than employees of a corporation. So I think a definition would be pretty key. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will definitely support a remote workforce task force. There's so many things that it needs to identify. Is there going to be dedicated space that the remote workers will need? Needs need to be addressed for remote workers. There needs to be networking done and building relationships between potential remote workers and economic development departments. The report we just had spoke to attracting workers very well, as to attract workers that we already need. But a remote worker already has a job for the most part. He's just looking for a place to do it. So I think there's a little bit of difference there. This task force can really do some of this organically because there are some people in this community that have good experience with working with remote workers or have done it themselves that we've all spoken to that would love to help out on this. There's two I can think of off the top of my head that should probably be a part of this because they've done it. And there's no use having, three of us and three administrators hacking at this and we've never done it. It would seem kind of odd to me try to teach my son how to fish. I've never fished a day in my life. So I think it's a good idea, and I think if we're going to build this task force, then we definitely need to reach out to those people to serve on it, especially the people that have done it, because that's where the value of a task force will come in, and they'll bridge that gap between possible remote workers and what our city administration can do for them. So let's consider lay people.
Councillor Gardner.
Very quickly, I'm going to support this, and I brought this forward 8 months ago, and I'm glad it's happening. And the other point I'd like to make is the remote workers, for the most part, are young families with young people, and that's what we're lacking in this city, young folks.
Thank you. So I'd like to just provide a word of caution. So I think that this is a great idea. I think our strategic plan speaks to several task forces, by the way.
Yeah.
One on housing, one on the surplus lands, the federal lands, one on, to Councillor Ibau's point, the broader workforce, not just remote workforce. So my caution here is our strategic plan. It is very, very difficult for us as council and for this very lean management team that we have here to focus on that strategic plan. We need help, folks, and you're going to hear from me more in the coming months on that. Every week brings a new challenge. Last week is a case in point. I wanted to sit down and work on a task force for the surplus lands, and because Cornwall is what it is, meaning it's competent, it's attracting all sorts of things, that means a lot of things happen. And this team needs some support to stay focused on our strategic plan. So I'm going to support this, and I'm going to continue to tell this city and this council that we need to have reinforcements in terms of our strategic plan. We are competing with other cities, and we are rapidly going to lose ground if we are not able to stay focused on our strategic priorities. And I would say up till now, it's been a struggle. We've done all things competently. We've passed 2 budgets. We've kept this city running. But in terms of our strategic priorities, in terms of moving us forward, we need reinforcements. Councillor Townda, do you want to wrap up?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. All in favor? Against? Carried. Mr. Boileau? Go ahead.
So I just, for clarification, I'm wondering whether council would like to, for administration to come back with a report on the terms for the task force, or would council like administration work with 2 or 3 assigned councillors to help develop that?
Councillor Townda.
Madam Mayor, I think perhaps we could work together on this for expediency's sake as well. I mean, I know it has to come to council, but if a few councillors have some input, that might help expedite the process.
So is council okay with that? So what I'm hearing is that a few councillors will put forward some ideas. They'll go through CAO and Mr. Boileau, and will come forward with a recommendation as to the process. I see consensus. So I will expect, particularly those councillors who moved and seconded the motion, to be in touch with administration with some guidelines. Everybody okay? Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Heading into communication reports, Madam Mayor. Temporary street closure for the International Men's March, with a recommendation that council approve the temporary street closure of Pitt Street from 3rd Street to 2nd Street on Saturday, June 13, 2020, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., subject to the requirements contained in the city's corporate policy on temporary street closures for special events.
Moved by Councillor Ibao, seconded by Councillor Gardner. Any discussion? Councillor Bennett?
I just have a question, actually.
Yes, they have your size.
That's my second question. First question is, this, if I'm not mistaken, is usually held, started in Lamoureux Park, and it was an actual march. So they want the street closure for what reason? To walk in that area, or that's going to be where it'll end up and be like a party? I'm just not sure what the actual purpose for the street closure is.
Mr. Boileau, do you know who would be able to answer that question?
Sure,
Mr. Falco?
I did read, of course, the concerns about using the south portion of Pitt Street and therefore now using the north part of Pitt Street, and so I'm assuming that it's on the street.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm just wondering why they wanted to move it there. I'm not against it. It was nice to see the walk before. It was from Lamoureux Park down Montreal Road, and I can't remember where it ended up, but I was just wondering if they were using it as a place to party when it was finished, a celebration area, or if they were actually going to do it right in that block. So anyway, that's okay. I'm supportive of it one way or the other. I was just curious why.
Councillor Gardner?
My understanding through you in the report was that it would be from 2nd Street up to 3rd or 4th Street.
Right.
So that it wouldn't affect the buses.
Right.
So but I will support it too. I've walked it before, boy, it hurts.
Yeah. Welcome to our world, Councillor Gardner? All in favor? Against? Carried. Next item, Madam Clerk.
RFP 19P15, Architectural and Engineering Services for Cornwall's Arts Centre. The recommendation that this RFP be awarded to GRC Architects Incorporated from Ottawa at the total bid price of $404,099.30.
Moved by Councillor Bennett and seconded by Councillor Gardner. Go ahead, Councillor Gardner.
Question is on page 131, you've got $357,000 from a company, GRC Architects, yet you have Venton Group Limited Brantford at $369,000. Why did we not pick the lowest bid?
Madam CFO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this is an RFP process, so price is only one of the evaluation criteria through the committee review.
I just didn't see it,
Mhm.
an explanation for it.
Councillor McDonald?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm not sure to whom I'd like to address this question, possibly Mr. Boileau or possibly Mr. Fothrop. I would like, if possible, a bit of a description of what the winning group brought to the table, how they distinguished themselves and how they merited the award.
Mr. Boileau?
The community's been looking forward for a long time to this award having been granted.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we're all looking forward to getting these experts on board. Mr. Fothrop was on the committee that helped select this company, and so I would ask that he describe.
Mr. Fothrop?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the RFPs are evaluated on a number of criteria. Experience of the company, experience of their personnel, as well as a description of their understanding of what we're asking them to do. And so this company did very well in their other categories, as Councillor Gardner pointed out, weren't the lowest price, but their experience was exceptional, and that they presented a very, very good team. So they ultimately were hard to recommend. So
I would just like an explanation, so if the lowest price isn't taken, then I'd like to know why in the report.
If
Mr. Boileau?
Sure, if I may, so at the top of page 131 are the categories that are measured by the committee. So the experience as described, the experience of the proponent, the experience and qualifications, as well as the understanding of the objectives, and then cost is a factor as well. They're all weighted. They're all scored by each of the members on the committee. And so it's a fairly scientific process, and the result is what you see as the score.
I understand that, but that goes for all three that are here. So why, if you had told me that they were probably negligent somewhere with their cost or understanding the objectives, then I would have understood why we picked the one that we did rather than the lowest cost, that's all. Thank you.
Does anybody want to add anything from administration? No? Councillor McDonald, were you finished asking your question?
No, actually, Madam Mayor, if you don't mind,
Please go ahead.
I would just like, if we can have that information, a rounder sense of what the experience was that this group brought to the table. Did they have some landmark buildings that they worked on, or is their field of expertise particularly banks or art galleries, or?
Through you, Madam Mayor, their experience was predominantly, or very strong in the arts and culture sector, especially in theater design.
Thank you.
Councillor Bergeron?
Thank you. I have a few questions for the CFO, if I might. First one, so we originally had said we would finance 290,000. This one is coming in at 404. Does that mean we're financing the entirety of this?
Madam CFO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the net cost to the corporation is the 363, so it is above budget of the 290. The city is planning to finance this along with its portion of the overall art center, so design and construction. So we're waiting on, for communication from, the application we put in for funding to the government.
Okay, so, we don't finance HST in general?
No, that's not a cost to the city.
Second question, so you just touched on it, the $6 million that we approved in our budget this year, we're gonna take the difference from there? Is that what I'm
I
understanding?
understand that the entire project, presented to council is a $6 million project,
But
design and construction.
that's included in that?
The design will go forward. We're undertaking that work. The second phase, and maybe Mr. Barolo will comment further, is waiting for other results of that application.
Before you answer, are the results of this application contingent on this being done?
No.
I like straight answers. No is perfect.
No, he was going to complete that.
The application cannot pay for retroactive activities, and so, and quite honestly, if we were to wait for the application to proceed, we could be waiting quite a long time, and so we cannot wait for the application process to be completed.
Okay, that's what I thought. They're not tied together. We're doing this regardless, whether the application is approved or not.
That is correct.
Now, and maybe this is for the CFO, if the application is not approved, we have still approved moving forward with the $6 million project.
Through the 2020 budget, council's approved the Arts Center. Currently, I believe, let me just take a look, I have printed it out. So, in it says that a funding application has been submitted to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, and that should the funding application be successful, the project funding would be divided by, with the municipality, 26%, 33% for the province, and 40% for the government. If that application is not successful, a report will come back to council regarding the project.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Couple of quick questions. Every time I ask about the potential operating budget, people articulated that, well, we don't know because we don't know what we're gonna have, and once this firm has done their work and they design the building and they come up with drawings and that kind of thing, and this might be to Mr. Fothrop, will we have a closer idea as to what the operating cost might be, or is this just, we're gonna have this drawing and, like, is this gonna answer any questions in terms of the operating cost?
Mr. Fothrop?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this consultant which we're proposing to hire, that would not be within their scope. They're to do the design for the building, but once that design is complete, and as you say, we know what is in the building and what we have to rent, what could be done is an operating budget could be established based on that. Now, an option could be to go back to a company that did an operating budget for the feasibility study, which proposed an expansion to the civic complex. But I would suggest that that's probably an appropriate time to engage, whether it be this consultant or another consultant, to prepare an operating budget based on that.
So we wouldn't really, once this work is done, there's nothing that's gonna say, okay, here's what we think is the cost of, based on this drawing. We would have to do more work.
This work is say how to build this art center. We're discussing it, we can determine what it would cost on.
Okay, thank you. To Ms. Bailey, we have currently put $6 million potentially, now I realize it's not in this budget, but we've committed to, if we need to, finance approximate or just shy of $6 million to complete this project if the application for senior level funding doesn't come to fruition.
Madam CFO?
Through Through you, Madam Mayor, you're correct, it's not in the 2020 budget, the long-term debt associated with the Arts Center, but it is in our long-term financial plan.
Right, which gets me to the next question, and that is, if by some chance, after we commit this money to the $400,000, and we say, wow, this isn't what we thought we wanted, or what this is the cost of the project is higher than we thought, or whatever the circumstances are, could council conceivably say, well, you know what, we know what we wanted, but this isn't working for us, and can a council say, we don't want to commit to the funding after we've sort of committed to the funding?
So, yes, council's strategy or their long-term priorities.
I understand all the stuff that's transpired thus far.
Right.
Maybe I can couch it a little bit, Your Worship, to when we did the aquatic center, about the original plan was for so much money, then the thing came in $3 million over what we had budgeted. That's the truth. And so council at the time had to say, whoa, wait, how are we gonna tackle this? Now, I got voted out of office, so I never really figured out how it kind of came to fruition. But the point is simply this: the respective council that was elected had to figure out how to make that work. So, where I'm going with this, Your Worship, with your indulgence, I appreciate, is that based on after this plan, if we see a number that isn't working for us, as has happened in the past, like what would our recourse be?
So, through you, Madam Mayor, council is part of the process. So after the design is complete, we're going out for construction. Council is part of those decision matters, and so at any time, if council has or wants to go in a different direction, it would be at the direction of council approving that.
Good. That being said, Your Worship, has been consistent. It seems I have more questions than answers. However, I'll support the recommendations simply because you have to sometimes commit some money in order to figure out what it is you're actually going to do. That, like I said, I wish things were a little cleaner, but I know based on previous projects that I have participated in, i.e. the library, for example, the aquatic facility, it's not always clean. I'm not sure, like I said, I don't feel like I'm getting the answers, but I'll support this because I think if there's any hope of getting an answer, it has to be through this. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor McIntosh, did I see your hand up or not?
Well, okay. You saw it now.
I did.
I was under the impression that a few council meetings ago, we had this discussion. I think Councillor Bergeron brought up the fact that the operating budget, and we voted as a council, we're moving ahead with this. And I think I used the expression, we just jumped out of the plane, it's, you know, we don't get back into it. We seem to be, we got capital and we got operating. Capital one, we got a fairly good idea, I think, where we're going with this. I think the figure of 6 million comes around. I guess it's the operating budget that Councillor Bergeron might be able to saying, hey, I want to see what it's going to cost to operate this thing. And I thought the figure of 200,000 a year was thrown out there at one point as a rough estimate. Mr. Fothra?
Mr. Fothra?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the feasibility.
Operating.
The feasibility study that recommended an expansion to the complex had an operating budget of 130,000.
130,000.
Or, I should say deficit.
Yeah, it's going to cost us 130,000, we think, to operate this place. It can't be that hard to figure out. You know, light, heat, maybe hire an employee.
I agree.
Against, versus the revenue.
I agree.
I think it's 130,000 is probably pretty close.
Mr. Boileau.
We know our square footage, and we have an old building, which we're gonna get the benefit very soon of having professional architects tell us the best way to develop this square footage. What we had, or what we have from the previous architects who did the fit test, is really more ballpark information than what we're about to receive. So there's a lot of work to be done. The public's going to be involved, etc. And so the architects are going to help us determine what the best way of developing the square footage is that we have.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we could give you a figure of what the operating costs are for about a 5,000-6,000 square foot building.
Well, you couldn't give us the revenue.
We can't give you revenue. We also can't tell you exactly what the operating model will be. Will it be, handed off to a third party to manage this, or is it going to be a city-operated facility? All of these things are to be determined. But I think, and we've seen both models in our visits to other locations. They're both good models. It's just a matter of figuring out the best thing for Cornwall. But I just want to point out that there's a lot of work to be done, and I think, and I know that I was reading recently a commentary about making this as lean designed as possible. I'm sure the architects are going to be entirely in favor of that, and so I think we're going to make this as lean as possible, and we're going to have to work within the budget that we have.
Yeah, on the square footage thing, I see one of our most successful developers sitting in the audience. I'm sure when he builds things, he can figure out in the square footage what it's gonna cost to operate the thing before it even begins. And it might be opposite, but, we have a pretty rough figure of what the operating cost is.
Well, we know it's likely going to be, probably 2 stories, but even that, I'm not 100% sure on, so.
Anyway, it's just, not nervous, but when we start talking like, maybe we'll spend this 400,000, we spent 350 for it, we've got 800,000 into it. You know what? We might not go ahead with it. That makes me a little nervous. So.
Well, I've always been confident since council purchased this property that this was going to, first of all, I fully support the location. I think this is a terrific project. He's going to really appreciate it, but there's a lot of work to do. And I think getting the architects involved is going to really bring us along to determine how it should best be.
One other quick question. We're going to hire the architect who's going to come back with a report later this year.
Right.
We've applied for grants.
Yes.
Any idea what the distance between getting that report from the architect and when we say the province and the feds say, okay, you're in or you're out?
So the architects will probably, hopefully, take longer than the grant application, because the grant application we understand to be summer, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
So we will have the answer to grants before the architects have a final product for us.
Okay. And I was under the impression that regardless of the grants, we're going ahead. I thought that was at that previous council meeting. That's what we discussed, and I think there's a recorded vote on it.
Shout out to Mr. Godard, yes. Councillor McDonald?
I guess I would just like to comment, Mr. Bolo did mention public consultations, which will be an important element of of this work that's going to be done by this group. And we really can't predict what the center, what final form it will take, and what facilities it will be able to accommodate, what events and that sort of thing. But I'd want to say that we already had some community consultation and every opportunity the last year and a half of people have been in the bank. We've invited them to let us know what they wanted. And the one thing that came through loud and clear, and I have to say this because I heard they're going to build lean or something, people always said, do it right. And I just want to say, there was a mention of the aquatic center too, and there's so many people who feel regret that we didn't raise the extra money that would have taken to do the aquatic center right, because it's limited in what we can do there. Whereas the Benson Center, we did it right. And I think the public very much wants to see us do this art center right.
Any other comments?
Just
Councillor Gardner?
clarification, the aquatic center came in on budget of 8.5 million. The following council put in the extra elevator, and that's what brought it up over $9 million. That's what the overage was over 8.5. 8.5 was what this council, at the time, with Dennis Carr and I were on that committee, had we gone above $8.5 million, council at that time would have voted it down.
Anybody else? At the end of the day, This council and past councils build things. We just do. And all of us have different experience. Mine happens to be the Benson Center and the wastewater treatment plant. And there were times where we haggled over the operating costs, many, many times. We haggled over the size of those pieces of infrastructure, many, many conversations. I suspect we will do the same, and it will get built. So, all in favor? Against? Carried.
Supply and installation of LED lighting fixtures for the Benson Center, the Cornwall Civic Complex, and King George Park softball field. The recommendation that this tender be awarded to JWK Utilities Plus Site Services Limited from CARP at the total bid price of $801,017.45.
Moved by Councillor Towndale and Councillor Bennett. Any discussion? All, oh, Councillor Bennett, go ahead.
Quick question. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This particular report speaks to the fact it's going to cost a little bit more than we had planned. When I read that, the first thing I thought of is, was that overage, is the cost of running the new LED lights going to save us money in the long run that would make up for the overage that we're going to be spending up front?
Question for Madam CFO or Mr. Boileau?
I just know through knowledge in listening to Mr. Fothrop talk about LED lights and our experience with LED lights that certainly the payback is very quick. I'm not sure if Mr. Fothrop wants to speak to that at all, or?
Mr. Fothrop?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we haven't done a cost recovery analysis. We are confident that the savings will be sufficient. It will pay for itself in time. The overage that we saw in the results were related largely to the